Okay, so the podcast is called Lead Well, Build Better. So, what's one piece of advice that you can give our listeners today that are going to help them to lead well and build better when it comes to branding?
My one piece of advice is to work. There's so much in a brand. It's not just the logo. It's not just the slogan. It's not just the colors. Unfortunately, many people think that's what it is. What I find that is a huge misnomer is that many people that are not as familiar with AI will just say, "Oh, throw some content together or create an image. Just use AI." And while we can all do that, what we lack in AI is that human touch.
What if building a business that lasts felt clearer, more profitable, and far less overwhelming for you and everyone who depends on you? Welcome to Lead Well, Build Better.
Hello, everyone. This is Shante. Welcome to the podcast Lead Well, Build Better, where we help founders have sustainable business meant for growth. Today, I have Nishat Jones with me to join us on our podcast. Nishat, tell us about you and your business.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Shante. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Nishat Jones, and my company is Stratiate. I focus on working with B2B clients and helping them clear the noise and have profitable growth. So I really operate as a fractional chief growth and marketing officer. I want to ensure that there's a lot of consistency and alignment between brand, marketing, and sales, and that helps drive and grow profitably.
All right, nice. So, yes, Nishat is a fractional CMO and has been, how long have you been a fractional CMO?
I am coming up on my 2 year anniversary.
Ooh, happy anniversary. Happy anniversary. That's great, great, great. So, Nishat, in your role as fractional CMO, how have you seen leaders or how can leaders help their teams to show up as like true ambassadors for their brands?
It's a great question. So, as an employee, every single employee is a brand ambassador. So, you're working on behalf of the organization and you automatically are a brand ambassador. What I find is that leaders model the brand first. So when the leaders live the values, show those, and connect the teams to purpose, they naturally bring and carry the brand forward. So it's always fantastic to have leaders that really exemplify the brand and are able to tell the story and then trickle that down and articulate it very clearly to their employees.
Okay, nice. So the leaders are able to articulate the brand and it kind of filters to their employees. Have you ever experienced any leaders that had challenges with that?
Absolutely. There are times, I think the hardest time for leaders to really exemplify the brand is when you have a refresh or a rebrand. And so at that time, it's very important to ensure that the brand architecture and the brand story is shared across the entire organization and do it at every level. So, not to trickle that message down, but literally to be able to tell every single employee, this is why we're doing this. This is our brand story, especially when it's a merger or an acquisition. It can be challenging for employees to understand that and leaders to articulate that message very clearly. So, again, it's as much as we can communicate. I think in every organization, communication is always key. So, the more you can communicate and help, the easier it makes it for everybody.
Okay, great. And I also know, oh, and I know for operations, like culture is super important. So how do you intertwine like branding with the culture of the organization?
That's that's really key because the brand and the culture should go hand in hand. If we say that we value employees' times and that we, value work-life balance, we have to live those promises. So, culture and brand go hand in hand. It also is a attribute on why certain people will join organizations is because they really like the culture, the fit, the values, the mission, what the company is about. So those things definitely work hand in hand because it's all part of the brand story and the brand architecture.
Yeah, and I think brand, just like culture, is so important to all organizations. So what type of pitfalls do you see when companies don't connect branding with their sales and marketing?
Um, Not having true alignment it is a huge pitfall. Um, there is just operating in those silos, and so it's us versus them, and that's just not a good fit or a good place to be for either team or either department. That's probably one of the biggest pitfalls I've seen.
Okay, cool. So when you come in as fractional CMO and you see there's kind of disjointed sales and marketing and there's that missing branding piece, how do you come in and bridge those teams together with branding?
So I like to first evaluate and listen and learn. Do a lot of listening. It's really important to ask a lot of questions and to listen and understand what's driving maybe some of that separation between sales and marketing and the brand. So evaluate, listen, learn, and then to make some recommendations on how do we create some joint efforts between all the teams, but focused around the brand. So looking at how they're using the technology stacks. Are they using a CRM? Are they doing it well? Are there, again, it's not the blame game because that tends to happen quite often. So we want to remove that from the equation and really focus on how can we align better together so we can promote the brand together, because at the end of the day, just like your first question, we're all brand ambassadors. We want to ensure that we're going to market together with the same voice, the same thought, and the same strategy.
Okay. So you mentioned tech stack. You mentioned tech stack. So can you tell me how a tech stack or technology plays a role in branding?
Absolutely, absolutely. When you think about your CRM, typically your customer relationship management tool, a lot of organizations, it's not just for sales and marketing. Operations are highly involved in there, and they should be involved in there. The customer success team or the customer experience team. So a CRM tool essentially is embracing a lot of the organization, including the C-suite. Your executive leadership team should be in there. So sales, marketing, your CEO, because they're able to see not only the pipeline, but the efforts of everyone, right? In a robust platform. So allowing everyone to have visibility to the CRM, what's happening, who's doing what, where do we play? It really helps to be able to reinforce the brand commitment that we're making not only internally to our employees, but also externally to our prospects and our customers, most importantly.
Yeah, I love that. And then, I'm ops. So just the CRM, just the alignment. So the branding is we have the culture and then we have the branding also helping bring everything together under one umbrella so everything moves smoothly. And like you said, we're all brand ambassadors. So, as we log into our CRM, there's a certain brand that's coming through. And so that technology stack helps with that. So technology is so important. So here's a question. How do you see AI playing a role in branding right now?
That's a great question. AI is playing a role in everything today. And the brand space, whether it's content, whether it's creative, it helps, but it's not taking over everything. So what I find that is a huge misnomer is that many people that are not as familiar with AI will just say, "Oh, throw some content together or create an image. Just use AI." And while we can all do that, what we lack in AI is that human touch. If you just throw things at AI, you're going to get out what is mainstream, and it's not humanized. It's not a personal touch, which is very important to promote your brand. All of us can say we have high quality, we have high data, we have fast turnaround, all those things, but they're just cliche terms until you can really personify the brand and communicate the message with that touch. It's a huge miss. So AI is important. It's a great tool for research. Don't get me wrong. It does a lot of things that help us work more efficiently. But at the end of the day, we need to go back and make sure it's humanized and there's that personal touch added to it to ensure that the brand is also human centric.
Okay. Now, I probably should have asked this question earlier. So, because we were talking about AI and kind of the things that AI can do, what actually goes into a brand?
There's so much in a brand. It's not just the logo. It's not just the slogan. It's not just the colors. Unfortunately, many people think that's what it is. But the brand is actually what I keep referring to as a brand story. It's part of your brand architecture. So who are we? Why do we exist? Why were we started? What is our mission? What is our vision? What is our values? What is our purpose? The additional things like the logo, the slogan, if you have one, or tagline, the colors, those all play a part into the brand. But the crux of your brand is really who you are, what you do, and why you exist.
Oh, okay. So for a founder that's listening and cannot answer one of those questions you gave that tells us how to create the brand, how do you help founders come up with that?
We sit down and we do a fun session. It really is. You're spending a couple hours getting a lot of your key stakeholders involved. I always like to incorporate not just the founder, but their leadership team. And then also I'm a very customer client centric person and feel like more organizations should be that way. So I always want to get some of your key customers involved too. So let's have a whiteboard session literally and just throw out some ideas, some thoughts. Typically your founder is going to have a lot of those answers, but what's always fun to see is whether the customer or client will also, those thoughts will resonate with them. When you talk about why we exist, why we're here, what we do, if that does not resonate with your customers, there's a complete disconnect, and we need to reevaluate that and reassess it before we put a brand story together.
Oh, I love that you bring in the customer, because I feel like, even in operations, sometimes we forget about the customer. We're working on the back end to make sure everything works for the team, but we're kind of forgetting about that customer experience and how they're feeling when they're coming into the organization. So I love that not only do you have the key stakeholders, and I heard you say multiple stakeholders, so it's not just one person, but you're also bringing in the customer, so you can have their experience on what they're feeling with the brand.
Exactly. You're looking for that alignment. Again, it's more alignment we can have across the entire organization, the better.
Yeah, cool. So how does clear branding keep teams aligned to business goals?
That's a great question. I think that you really have to make sure that everybody's telling the same story. Like your messaging is your compass, that's your guiding point, and we need to ensure that everyone tells the same story all the time and we're all moving in the same direction. It is very challenging to ensure consistency when it comes to brand messaging. And so you really have to ensure that everyone's moving in that same direction so we can talk about why we exist, who we are, why it matters. The marketplace really needs to have that understanding, but it all starts at the top. So we have to form the strategy, and the executive team, typically the CEO, CFO, COO, you're going to have a lot of those team members involved in this. Put together your marketing strategy, your brand strategy, and then we'll disseminate that across the entire organization and make sure that everybody's aligned and that all goals funnel back up to that core strategy of the organization.
Yeah, I find sometimes when we come into businesses and we're implementing new things, it can take some time. So let's talk about the time it could take for your brand, especially a rebrand or just a refresh brand, to be implemented in your organization, because I think it's important. I think sometimes because of AI, we think things can be done in like 15 days, and it's not true with people involved. So when you come into an organization on average, and this is an average, so nobody hold her to it. On average, how long does it take for the whole organization to bring that brand on board?
I would say it's if it is a rebrand, it can take 3 to 6 months. If it's a refresh, you can typically do that within 3 months. It depends on the scale of the organizations, but yes, it does take time. That is a great point. Nothing happens overnight or in a couple of weeks. It takes months. And then on the other end of the spectrum with your customers, if they know you by a certain name, some of those customers that may have been your customers for 5, 10, 20 years will continue to operate under that brand message, the previous one. So
Yeah.
It's an evolving process that you just definitely have to keep reminding them and letting them know.
Yeah. And when you say that, it reminds me of Twitter. I think people still call Twitter, but I think it's X.
Right, exactly. No, perfect example. Absolutely. We're all so used to some of these brands that have been around for decades, and it's hard to make that change. So it's hard as an employee when you're going through that, and it's definitely hard as a customer when you're going through that.
Yeah. So, what advice would you give leaders who want their brand marketing and sales together for growth?
I would say break down the silos, align on shared metrics, and then keep the customer front and center. So those are my three pieces of advice. If you can do those three things, I think you're going to make a huge difference in the entire organization, both inside and outside.
Nice. And then I just want to go back to one point. You were talking about bringing in stakeholders on that conversation about branding. I think you may have mentioned it, but do you ever bring in like the sales or marketing team in that branding conversation?
So we try to limit that conversation to 8 to 10 people. And we will do an internal one, and then the customer ones are done separately because we don't want to bring them into the initial customer one because, again, we want to look for that alignment. So the internal one that's done first with the internal stakeholders, we would have the head of sales or the head of marketing or the head of operations. So definitely they would be part of the key stakeholders that are involved in that discussion.
Okay, awesome. So, here's a question for you for the founders that are listening. Let's say they started their business about 10 years ago. They picked two colors they like. They had a logo. They feel like they kind of have a brand, but they've realized they don't have a brand. What are some of the first things that you think they need to do to start that brand process besides hire you?
There you go. If they hired me, we'd have all the answers, I would hope. Um, I I really think it's looking at your brand positioning. So, have you done an assessment of your entire marketplace, your industry? So the industry that you focus, that your product or your service is in. So you're really going to look at it. And it's not to be a copycat, but you need to look at the competitive space. But you also have to look at the space that you're in. How much of the market share do you have? Are you segmented? Have you gone through a segmentation exercise where you're looking at by industry, by type, whatever it may be? So there's a lot of things that I feel like if you've gathered any data, you can start doing that. If not, again, there's a lot of data and research available where you can start looking at your brand, looking at the brand essence, first of all, what it means, and then moving into, have you done the segmentation, the brand assessment itself to see how it is in the marketplace? Is there any brand loyalty? And then also your segmentation. That's really critical to understand what's driving revenue, what's driving that brand recognition. Do you have that loyalty? There's a lot of small mom and pop companies that their customers are super loyal to them. I mean, you just think about a small bagel shop, a small coffee shop compared to all the 900-pound gorillas in bagels and coffee. There's lots of those, right? But there are some places, the little mom and pop shops, they open up at 3 a.m. every day and they have their loyal customers. So what's driving that? How do you understand that? And a lot of that can be done through some research and evaluation.
Okay, great. Okay, so the podcast is called Lead Well, Build Better. So, what's one piece of advice that you can give our listeners today that are going to help them to lead well and build better when it comes to branding?
My one piece of advice is to work in alignment. You have to break down silos and you have to work together as one unified team. You are one brand and you should operate as one team. So the more communication you can have internally, the more you can collaborate and ensure that your messaging is aligned. Go to market with the same vision, mission, and strategy, the better your brand will be.
Beautiful. So, the word of the day, everyone, is alignment. Break down silos and align. All right.
Absolutely.
Great. So, Nishat, do you have any events or anything coming up that we should know about?
I'm actually going to be at a conference later this week that I think would be beneficial for many people. It's called the Sell Well Conference. It's put on by Catherine Brown in Houston, Texas. And if you're going to be there, it should be exciting. You learn a lot about business development, about marketing, about selling. So it'll be great. And besides that, look for me on a few upcoming podcasts because I'm really excited to participate in them and really share the brand and digital strategy.
Great, great. And then, so if we want to follow you, I already follow you, but if other people want to find you or follow you, how do they do that?
Reach out to me on LinkedIn. There's only one Nishat Jones. And you can also find me on my website, strate8.com. It's STRATE, the number 8.com.
Okay, great. So thank you everyone again to listening to the podcast Lead Well, Build Better. Remember to subscribe on Spotify and Apple. Talk to y'all later.